Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me for poppy design today. And we're also going to throw in a few daisies in there. We have a nice little practice area for you to get you practicing all these strokes. So you can practice and paint this design with me today. All right, to start this design, I actually played around with a couple different products. Now, some of them I've had for a long time, and I'm sure that folk art has still very similar products around. They're antiquing mediums, and this one here is like a stain, a mahogany water-based stain, and they're both plaid products. Okay, so I'm sure there's different colors around. But the nice thing about folk art is that they have so many other products that are really great too, that if you don't want to go out and get the stains or the mediums, then definitely you could still use your multi-surface paints. If you're making a sign for outdoor and you only have the regular paints, then definitely you're going to want to seal it after. And the thing about when you're playing around with stains and outdoor items and wood, definitely sometimes there's a few tricks that I like to play around with to ensure that I can play around, and if you know me at all, I like to erase. So that helps me make sure that I can work my way through the project and feel like, that don't have to worry about wrecking a piece of wood that you might have, spent a lot of time getting it cut, or the money on the wood might be a bit more expensive than a regular canvas. So definitely, sometimes there is ways to baby step your way in, and playing with a sealer is definitely one of those things. So what I usually do is I'll stain my piece of wood, and then I'll spray it with a coat of sealer and make sure it's really good and dry, and then I'll paint actually right on top of the sealer. And then if there was a little mistake, then definitely I'm able to erase it with a clean brush. And then it also gives the wood just a little bit more smoother surface to paint on, because some of these pieces of wood are a little bit rougher. Even though you sand it, definitely the first coat sometimes really absorbs into the wood, and you have to put an extra second coat of your design. So again, that little extra trick of putting some sealer on after you stain your wood, especially with the water base kind of sealers like this. They are water based, these ones, and but you are playing with a very, very watery wash of the multi-surface. So whenever you're playing around with more than 30% of water inside a paint, you're playing with the integrity of the durability. So the multi-surface does say it's indoor outdoor, but definitely when you water it down to get it more translucent, so that you're just kind of staining wood with the paints, like I said, it won't be so durable. So you definitely need a coat of spray and sealer. There's a bunch of different ones around: urethanes, polyurethanes, water-based sealers, varnishes. A lot of them are very, very similar. It's just how you clean your brush. Some of them you definitely have to use more stronger spirits to clean your brushes. I usually end up with a polyurethane spray, and that way I don't have to worry about cleaning about any different brushes with it. But then you need to be in an outdoor environment so that you have a lot of good ventilation. So pros and cons with all the different sealers: see what you have in your local area, do some investigation. Usually the people that work at these stores are very helpful. You tell them you want a water base outdoor varathane, and they should be able to point you in the right direction. Either a brush on or a spray on version of protection to give it for the outdoor. If it's just going to be hanging on your door, like in between a screen door and your main door, you probably don't have to worry too much about really sealing it well. It's not going to get weathered too badly. And then of course, definitely if it's going to stay in the house, then you don't even have to worry about sealer at all. But I do try to, like I said, put that little coat of sealer after my staining, my antiquing mediums, especially with the water-based paints. Definitely we can play around with different floating mediums is, our common go-to to most 90% of the time when we need a little bit more slip in our stroke work. We can also use the floating medium to dilute a brown. And if you really like this mahogany mixture, then definitely pull out your berry wine and some burnt umber and play with them a little bit together, and you will very easily come up with a little bit more of a berry kind of burnt umber and get a very similar look. So depending on your color of wood like that you want to faux, this could be just a regular plain board. They're not very special, they're just very plain. So we can definitely go in with our brushes and add more veins and more detail and make it look like oak or something like that has a lot more veins in there. And then what I did is I just did a nice soft wash gradient so that it's a lot more translucent in the middle and darker around the edges. Okay, so because by the time I finish the design here today, then we're going to be taking over most of the design in the wood, so you can definitely play around after, and if you really wanted to tweak in a few of those little extra stronger veins that we often see in wood, then we can always just play around and add those later around the design. And because we can waste a lot of time on areas just trying to tweak in little extra little natural details that to enhance the wood look. But I don't worry too much about it, especially on a smaller little sign like this. Again, your design is going to take over the whole piece, right? Pretty much. Or if you're going to put words in there, if you really want to put welcome or something, simple, because again, depending on the size of your sign, you only have so much room for your design and words, so you have to kind of pick something really, really simple for your words, something small that you can kind of put in that'll still be visible from about 6 feet back, or just make a nice floral design that you can put as a nice little sign that you can just put a decorative painting kind of style design. And then you can always glue some dried flowers or add more ribbon, or do some extra little details to your sign that might pop it up to make it a little bit more festive for the season that you're trying to make. Okay, so when like I said, we were talking about the floating mediums, using it like a glaze. The Folk Art product does come out with a glaze product as well. Okay, it's glazing, so it's made for stains and antiquing and faux finishes, and it just helps you glide it along and translucent, give that paint a little bit more translucent color. So you'll see that in the bottle, some of our mediums have a little bit more color than others. This one has a little bit more milky white color. Our floating medium is a little bit more clear. And then we've also got a blending gel too. If you wanted to keep this, wet longer for some reason, if you were trying to manipulate your colors and whatever technique you're doing, maybe you're doing a really big piece and you wanted that little extra time for blending, that, you can work it before it really dries and soaks in. This might help you as well, a blending gel, to, again, make the color a little bit more translucent. Okay, so I'm going to I want to play around with this little mahogany because I already did do the front, but I will play around on the back here for you today. So then that way the front is good and dry quickly for you. And then I'm going to put some sealer on it and continue on with the rest of our design. So you can see a lot of the stains are already fairly watery. I really don't think that I put anything in it. Like I said, I have had these quite a long time ago. And you can use a sponge if you want. You can use a brush. Definitely, I have a brand new brush here. I definitely would suggest, if you're doing a lot of rough work coating, you know, try to find an old brush that's lost its chisel and it's not so brand new anymore, right? Something a little bit more stronger. Our fabric brushes even make a good wood brush too if you're just trying to have coverage for your background. It's a little bit more stiffer. This one is a bit older and a little bit beat up. So again, playing around with your stains and your different washes. If you're making a paint mixture with your glazing mediums, you know, you definitely want to have it pretty inky. Okay, so this is already really inky. If I wanted to dilute it a little bit more, like I said, in certain areas, then definitely having some sort of glazing medium or floating medium to dilute it a little bit more so that you have control of how translucent it is. So you can play around with your mediums and then you can see that you'll get a lot more translucent color. Okay, so this is with the medium and this is without. Hopefully you guys can see a little bit of the difference. And sometimes I'll do that. If you played around with our one-stroke techniques before, you know, definitely we sometimes will keep popping color just on the corner of our brush. And then we have something to play around with on the other side. So you keep adding some medium onto the other side. And you'll be able to have that little bit more stronger color just around the edges. And have a little bit more translucent color on the inside. So you can see here that I'm just dipping into the glazing medium and I'm trying to blend it into the wood. It goes in there so fast, guys, right? So this is what I was kind of wanting to show you, how fast this really penetrates. So you definitely want to pre-mix some over to the side, so then that way when you're flip-flopping that little bit lighter color in, you're getting that stain as well. Okay, so typically a lot of stains will have an option where you can put it on and then you can wipe it off. But you can see that, you know, some pieces of wood are very porous, and that stain just pops in there so fast. Okay, so what I usually do is just go around all my edges and just keep dipping into the corner of my brush and focusing on the outside of my board, getting that nice and dark around the outside. That way this is like a little bit consistent, you know, about a brush size all the way around, nice and dark. And then once you start getting into wanting to move a little closer, then you're definitely going to want to come over and pick up a little bit of pre-mixed translucent color to play around with and slowly get your gradient to come up in the middle. Okay, I'm just trying to get around this one side here, but primarily I do try to work across the top. You just working your way right across the top and slowly having a little bit more glaze and a little bit more washy color at a time, so that you're getting that gradient happening in the very middle. All right, you need a little bit more stronger color, you can always add it. Okay, so once I get about halfway, I like working towards myself, so then that way you can slowly layer down. And then we'll flip it around, and then you can work yourself. If you're left-handed, then you know you're obviously doing the other side a little bit more comfortably. Okay. Slowly work our way down with this stain. A little bit stronger color, so it's a little bit more even. And then now I'm going to start mixing a little bit more softer wash with that glaze. Still want a little bit of that pigment in there. Right? And then as you get closer to the middle, then it's pretty much whatever you have left in your brush. Just keep picking up that glazing medium, and pretty much whatever you got in your brush dirty is probably going to be enough to just give that little hint of color. Let it dry. If you really feel like you want it to be a little bit darker, you know, you can definitely add a darker color into it. If you're using the paints, you want it even darker, richer at the back area. You could always put in a tiny little bit of black into your burnt umber. Try to get it a little bit cooler brown. And then just play with it a little at a time until you're comfortable with the color. So again, if you go a little too dark, you might not see some of these grains that are popping out. Okay, so this is actually quite nice here in the corner. And I could either pick my favorite side now, take a look at both sides of the sign, and pick my favorite side. Okay. Always enhance it, let it dry, and enhance your edges a little bit darker. If you want them. Okay, I just have a little bit left on my plate there, so I figured I'd play a little bit more on the edges of this side. You can hang it somewhere and then both sides will dry. But make sure it's dry really good, guys. Sometimes I like to play with these little projects there to get things started in the evening. And then I'll go to bed, and then in the morning it's nice and dry, and then I'm safe to play on it. Sometimes we're just not patient enough to let things dry. So definitely let it dry really good before you go ahead and start painting on it. Or if you feel like you want to spray it with sealer. And then, like I said, if you have any accidents along the way and you don't like anything, it's just so much easier to erase your little mistake, especially on wood, and it won't disturb this, because if you really rub hard enough to remove your mistake, you will remove some of your stain. Okay, so again, I went and made that a little bit darker. And then you definitely want to go around all your edges. My edges are looking pretty good from my first coat that I did. Right, so you're going to want to have all your edges of your sign to be all similar. Okay, so I kind of brought out some little lighter grains that were popping out in the wood. This one does have a little bit of a bow in it. That's the problem with some of these MDF boards. And this one I already got pre-cut from the Dollar Tree or Michael's or somewhere. So it's been around in my shed for a little while in the freezing cold, never painted on in the wintertime, and sat around in the heat in the summertime. So, you know, definitely these MDF boards can change in time. So it is definitely really important if they're going outside to make sure that you put a good outdoor sealer on it. Right, so with sealers, if you've seen some of my other courses, I use these deck finish. It's the Varathane French side diamond wood finish, water-based. Doesn't matter what it is, in my opinion. If it's a spray form, I don't have to worry about cleaning brushes. But sometimes you will get less odor from water-based Varathanes as opposed to ones that you have to use like the really strong spirits to clean your brushes with. So this company does come with a brush-on version as well as a spray version. And of course these come in the satin, semi-gloss, and gloss as well, right? So when you're playing around with different layers, like you really want a good protection, or you want that extra high gloss, or you want a really matte look, but you want a really good protection. Sometimes we feel like we have to put 2 or 3 coats on something to give it extra coats. That's fine, but if you're doing a satin look or like a real matte look, then still work with your gloss. So you'll have to buy 2. Buy 1 of each, or buy semi-gloss at least. And then what happens is the clear gloss, the gloss is more clear. Then when you get into the semi-gloss, it's got a little bit of discolored liquids in it, often very similar to like that milkiness that you get in some of our blending gels or our glazing mediums that I was talking about earlier. You get that almost like disturbance, so it's not really clear or translucent. And if you did 3 coats with a satin or matte, it could disturb the look of the finish of your design, all that painting that you've done. So if you really want a matte design finish after, spray with 2 coats of gloss first to get the protection, and then give it a good spray, or even 2 really light sprays. Light sprays are always going to be better than heavy sprays. It'll dry faster and also give you a nicer, smoother finish. All right, the way they spray out, like this particular one has this skinny little nozzle here that sometimes won't hurt your fingers. Some people complain about that spray cans hurt their fingers. But what I noticed on this Rust-Oleum product that I found, they're getting better and better with their products now too, and they've got a couple different spray Varathanes, and this one here is also non-yellowing, UV resistant, indoor, outdoor, and it also comes, it says, with a anti-angle spray, so it has, and a comfort tip. So the spray comes out on a little different angle, and a little bit more accurate, I guess. And then also the size of it, guys, like if you see the size of these, it's a lot more comfortable, and also not as wiggly. If you know, even hairspray, you know, sometimes it's wiggly, it spits and sputters because you're not consistent on holding it down. So this one does give you a little bit more of a base to it, so when you're pushing it down, it gives you a nicer stream. So these are little things that I've come across through the years. You know, as I find new products, I'm always going to share them with you. But of course, you know, depending on your location, where you're from, maybe you don't have the same product lines as I'm using here, but these are just from our local Canadian Tire, Lowe's, Home Depot. You know, they're all very similar, the big box stores, and or some other whatever hardware stores that you have locally might have some of those products too. But just keep that in mind about the 2 or 3 coats, you know, and the semi-gloss and the matte. Definitely sometimes you'll get a little bit of bumps and lumps on your finish from the spray or maybe from the wood. It's always good to have like a buff block and give it a nice little buff get rid of all those little extra bumps, and or you know, from maybe you rolled it on, you'll definitely might get some little bubble bumps that dried, you know. So if you're doing multiple coats, definitely sand it a little bit in between, and it doesn't have to be a hard sand, just something to knock off those bumps, give it a nice smooth finish. And then that's basically what we're gonna do right now to continue our design with. But those are all definitely tips and tricks that I'm sharing with you that is also at the end. So when you want to seal your design in thereafter, you're going to spray it again. You maybe want to give it another 2 or 3 coats. You know, give it 2 good coats first, and then a light sanding if you're afraid to knock off your painted, you know, your paint might be a little bit more raised. But definitely, I've done it lots of times on my signs, and you know, if you do need to have that little light buff, then these, like I said, these little nail file buffers are great to have around. And then now it's ready to continue on. You can still see a bit of the semi-gloss in there. And my sealer is protecting my antiquing stain that I used, so that if I do have to erase, then definitely it's going to be nice and smooth. It's not going to absorb the paint as much. When we start painting with our design, that sealer is going to help really put that little barrier on there now for you, so that you can paint your designs and get a nicer coating with it. There's lots of great backgrounds you can do too if you want a little bit more shabby chic there. You could always paint it gray and then paint white over it and distress it, and you know, but I do like sometimes a nice natural wood look for my signs. So that's what we're going to do today. Maybe in another project we will come up with some different finishes that we can do for wood designs. But today I definitely wanted to give you something simple to do as well, and show you the new stains, but also give you a little practice area and a project to paint. Hence my library of this whole section is all practice and paint. So we're going to get out the cardstock, and we're going to review some of the strokes that are needed for this design, and we're going to talk about the colors that we're going to be using and playing around with. Traditionally, we play around a lot with our engine red, but there's also a beautiful cardinal red. It's a little bit darker, richer, gives you a little different colors options. Playing around with berry red for shading. You can definitely put in a little bit of black, or even a little bit of Parisian blues, or dioxines purple if you wanted to darken that way. Depends on what kind of color poppies you want to make. If you took my practice course with the poppies, I give you lots and lots of different variations of styles, and we're going to be playing around with a few of those elements today. And with this design here, I did use the cardinal red and the orange to highlight it a little bit, and then also a little bit of the daffodil yellow. Okay, so we don't really want a yellow edge, but we do want to lighten up that orange sometimes a little bit, and sometimes we'll play around to brighten it up with a little bit of daffodil, and then sometimes we'll use a little bit of white to lighten up our poppies. But again, playing with white, you got to be so careful with the amount of white you play with, because then if you're playing around with red and white, then you end up with pinks. So we definitely want our poppy to be nice and red with a highlight, but also playing around with a little bit different color options for you here again for this practice and paint design. Okay, so if you have the cardinal red, that's wonderful. If not, then definitely your engine red is going to be great. If you want to deepen it just a tiny little bit, then definitely you can pop in a little bit of berry wine to do that. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys this combination. And how I put them together. It's fairly simple, but it's still got a very subtle little dip in there, and playing with direction and trying to make it look like it's flipped up or flipped down. You know, it does depend on which side you play around with your different ways of making your petals. Okay, so for this design, we did want to make some nice big poppies. You can use a 3/4 if you want, or a 16 for this design. The 16 does make it a little bit smaller for you for practice, so you don't take over your whole page. And so, again, it depends on what size your sign is too, and how big you want to make them. Okay, so we're going to play around with our 16 for the practice, and even on wood I will go ahead and use the floating medium with the multi-surface paint. There is a line of wood paints that is just for outdoor work and wood, but it's a very small line and they're very limited with colors. And like I said, the multi-surface does cover everything. And if you're from northern Ontario or Canada area, then we have some harsh winters. And if you want your sign to be out there all year round, then definitely you need to put extra protection on it. So sometimes with these reds, I don't even dampen my brush at all, guys. I know traditionally we always tell you to dampen your brush. So then that way, you know, it'll accept the paint a little bit better and help push it up there. But with these more translucent colors like the daffodil and the, especially the apple red, if you want a little brighter red, then definitely they're more translucent. The cardinal red is actually really nice coverage. It's just the orange that's a little bit translucent. So you want to make sure that your brush is dry when you're going to play around with this, if you can. If not, you're really going to take a paper towel or a towel to try to take all the water out if you have to clean your brush. All right, because it really makes a difference on how much coverage. You can see my orange is really nice and bright and nice and strong coverage, right? Because it's right out of the bottle, and there's nothing diluting it at all. If I'm having a hard time with my strokes, most likely it's going to be with my cardinal red, and I might put a tiny little bit of floating medium in that side. Again, depending on the amount of work that my brush is going to do for the strokes. Sometimes if you're doing small strokes, you don't need it to spread very far. You don't even probably need the floating medium. But if you do have bigger strokes and you want it to move a little bit more for you, then definitely having that little tiny bit of glide on wood or paper is going to help you with your practice today. Okay, if you feel like you want to just practice on some plastic first, it's going to be a lot easier. Just slip these practice sheets that I'm giving you into a plastic sleeve binder protector, or maybe you have some packs from Donna Dewberry that she has the plastic sleeves you can pop them into. Put any plastic that you can, even wax paper will work over these, and you'll still see through what I'm going to show you today. And then practice right on them. Okay, so with our different shell stroke movements, we definitely have a couple different options, and we have a lot of different wiggles. If you've seen some of my courses before, I joke about saying that we have 12 different shell strokes. So this one is definitely a lot looser and a little bit more bumpier, and we're going to connect it a little bit different. Okay, so normally our lighter color always usually ends up on the outside. Okay, so we want that dark to come in, and we want to do an open shell stroke movement. Okay, so we've got our closed and we have our open shell. So with our poppies, usually the center is actually quite large, right, compared to other flowers. So you have a circle, like maybe an oval shape, that you got to work all the way around. Okay, so we want to be able to have that space to have some petals go around. If you, you know, even look at the ones that we have on our, that we wear on our clothes for Remembrance Day, you know, they really only have 4 petals that go around. Okay, so I did show you a little bit about that. And so you can put 4, you can put 5, but what we're going to do a little bit different here today is we're going to add like a double petal in one petal. Okay, so we're going to do our 4 petals. So if you want to just give yourself markers, you're going to work your way around to do your 12 o'clock, your 3 o'clock, and then your 9 o'clock, and then your 6 o'clock basic stroke. Okay, so depending on if you make this area smaller than this area, it's going to make it look like it's tipped up a little bit more. If you did that reverse, you flip that around the other way, you make your top area bigger. Again, you make your sides nice and wide, and maybe you make your bottom a little bit smaller. You know, varying with your sizes is going to be make a real big difference too on the illusion of how it's tipped and stuff like that as well. Okay, so trying to advance you guys a little bit from the practice course as well, reviewing a few things that we covered, and then also bumping you guys up a little bit more, right? This is what these projects continue to do. So we definitely want to have like a 2/3 gradient. Okay, we don't need it too high. We don't want it half and half. You know, we want to be able to see that dark, and we want to see a lot of that light on the edge. So we definitely don't want to have like we do with our roses. These are going to be an open flower, and then we're going to want to see both those colors really good. Okay, so like I said, our basic shape of each petal is going to be an open, so you're going to have a slight angle on your open and your close of your stroke, and then right in the middle is where you're going to split it in half. Okay, so we're going to push this over here again. I want to keep this for you guys so you can print it out and keep this sheet I'm showing you. Okay. So we're going to come around like almost like our teardrop stroke. We can do a little bit of bump movements, and then we're going to come down. Then we're going to pull it up, and then do again a little more bump movements. Not waves, not our typical wash the floor movements, just like a nice soft bump. Okay, so you're basically adding more petals into this than 4, but we're doing it in 4 sections, but each petal is going to be like a double petal. Okay, then we're going to do our sides, and then we're going to do our other side, and then we're going to do our bottom. And then depending on which way you want to do your flip, okay, so sometimes we need that little extra room to do more flips on the bottom, right? So this is where it gives you the extra room, having that little more space that you're going to give yourself on the design to be able to do those flips. Okay, so with a smaller sign, you can flip your sign upside down in all different directions, but it is good to practice your work in the direction that you're doing your painting in. Okay, so I'm going to show you in both directions, and also how to bump it up a little bit too. Okay, so remember we're doing 2 petals, right? But in this bottom area, you can do a little bit more of a ruffle. And you're coming up, and you're really exaggerating that back flip, giving it lots of space, and then pushing over, and then backing up, and then coming up around. And you can do that maybe 3 times to pull in your bottom. Okay, but it's hard to really see the definition, especially on the rolling petals. Okay, so this is where we want to add just that little tiny bit of daffodil yellow. Okay, get that over here so it stays out of trouble out of the medium. Put my lid on. Alright, so now we want to tip with that little bit of yellow, daffodil yellow. And when I tip, a lot of times I want to blend it in, but just, you can do your 1, 2, 3 on your page, or you can do your 1, 2, 3 right here. And I'm not really blending it into the orange, I'm just trying to blend it up and control it on my brush. Okay, so again, I'm going to show you the stroke again upside down. So you're doing the waves. Okay, you're coming up, maybe you're joining in from another petal on the side, right? You can pull around, bump, give it a big roll, and then another bump, and a big roll, and then pulling it out around into your teardrop and pulling it in. Okay, so you can see with that tiny bit of yellow, it does help pop up your rolling strokes. Okay, so we do want to have that little bit of goldy yellow orangey color. We really don't want it too, you can see that the orange is almost too dark by itself, but we don't want it to be too yellow. Like if you were to just use yellow and red, it would be way too yellow. Okay, so you definitely just want to pop up and brighten up your orange with that daffodil, or even moon yellow. If you want a real strong brightness, you might use less, right? Pop up that orange just a tiny little bit, and then I'll show you that stroke again, because we are going to do this in different directions. So I want the flip down, you're going to pull it up, rock back, around. Again, I don't have enough floating medium, or I don't have enough paint. Okay, work that in, really push on my brush, add that yellow, okay, especially at the tips. Push around, start from the beginning. Don't be afraid to just stop where you are as soon as you notice that your brush stroke is getting dry. And then you're going to pull in. Okay, so it's the bigger you can make those waves. Okay, so we want to put that orange in there. And then just tip with the yellow. Okay, makes it a little bit different. Straight up, tip down and around. Oh, already noticed some dryness. Carry off where you were. Okay, sometimes I will go over my stroke twice to get that little bit more brighter tip on the edge and to smooth out my gradient. Okay, so you can see I started off with that 1/2 gradient, but when you're pushing around, it tends to push it right up there. Okay. So we have our small area and a pretty good size area for the side, and you know, then our other area for the back. Oops, dipping in the wrong color there. So I want to have that little bit of yellow highlight at the edge. So our back petal, down and then up and around. Remember, this is only paper, guys, forgive yourself. But it's also good to push yourself with, you know, this dryness, because just carry on. You'll learn how to just keep adding more paint, or add that little bit of medium in the side that needs it. Then we're going to come around where we left off, and then you can add a little bit more of a space, right? Again, double in, double, or even triple if you want to do a little bit of variations and curl that in. Working it in. squeegee that paint over from your sides, put it back where it belongs. Come over, pick up your yellow, just a 1, 2, 3. Come over on this other side. Now remember, we're going to come from where we were joining, coming down and around to give it that little bit of a curl, and then we're doing our 2, down, up and around, and in. Okay, so you can see that where I was doing this little curl movement, this is what we're trying to do, is join these petals all with a tiny little curl. Okay, so again, if it makes it easier for you guys, and maybe my hand's out of the way a little bit better for you guys. All right, so we come around this side, we want to have a curl. So coming around, don't have enough highlight there. And then really big curls. And then we're going to come around and then join it in to this guy. Okay, so it can be a little bit of variation. And this one's a little bit smaller, just to be able to keep that in there. Okay, so part of the trick too is not making this stroke so big. So when we do this stroke on some of the flowers, because this is making it very round shape, pushing that up a little bit more is going to make it a little bit more oval shape. And then that's really what's going to help as well on flipping that poppy to different directions. Okay, so I'm going to show you again. So you want your flower to point this way or this way, it's going to make a little bit of a difference. Okay, and we want to sandwich the shape a little bit more differently, not a perfect circle when we're finished. Right, so we've got to change the shape a little bit more. So we have our oval, and we want the oval to be on an angle in the direction we are going to be painting our flower. Okay, so we want to have the markers, if you want to give yourself some, off on a different angle. You don't want to be creating this up and down. Again, your side petals. And then you have your space for your bottom curly backflip. Okay, so again, to make things a little bit more flipped, you can create the back petals with just a regular mixture with no yellow in it, and then it looks like they're receded a little bit further too. Right, trying to make this look a little bit fancy, and just gentle down. The next petals on the side, you can definitely come out a little bit wider, and you can make those a little bit more brighter yellow if you want. Okay, and pull that in. Coming over on this side again, pull down, give it a bit of a space, makes it really interesting. In and out. Okay, so you can see I actually went wider than my circle there. Okay, so now I want to concentrate, and I might even overlap the center of my flower a little bit. Okay, because I really want to knock a lot of that bottom petal off with my center when I go and put my center in there. Okay, so again, we're going to come down, and we're going to really try to make this curly and then not pull it out too much. Okay, so I'm really trying to keep this flat looking. Okay, you see how oval my whole flower is? Okay, so I'm going to come over this again. do just a basic roll. And you don't even have to flip and rock back so far. It's really just a wave, right? And then in. Okay, so you really want to see those rocks up close to your center. So I'm going to show you a quick center that we're going to do. Right. You want to add a little bit more highlight to these, especially the ones that are close to your bottom. Right, how you join those two side pieces in. And then I always take my fingers, I like putting paint all over my hands, as you guys see, and just, you know, dab out that thick globbiness, because it'll dry a lot faster for you. And for the centers in this design, I use the smaller 1/4 inch scruffy so that I can try and make it a little bit smaller, right? And then we're using the daffodil yellow and a little bit of white. And then you can use coffee latte or you can use Pablo, depending on if you want it a little bit more warmer, a little bit more softer. You know, you can play around with either of those. I'm gonna play around with the Pablo. That's what you guys got, right? You don't really need a lot of it. Okay, so we're gonna pick up just a little bit of Pablo and a little bit of daffodil, and we're going to pounce. And then see how the darker colors always take over? You have to kind of move up out of that pile now. Add a little bit more yellow so that you're getting a bit of a half and half gradient. Right, so you really only want a small shadow of the Pablo around your little donut you're going to create. Okay, and then we want to make this yellow a little bit softer, pale yellow. Okay, so we're going to add a little bit of white to it. And then just make sure you're staying right up there so that you're almost 3/4 light yellow and maybe only 1/4 or 1/3 of your dark. Okay. So the idea too when you're playing around with your scruffies is also being able to tip your brush back and forth and manipulate these colors. You're not always just going straight, flat, up and down, bounce, 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 right? So you can be really gentle and tip back a little bit and get mostly dark. You can tip up a little bit on your angle this way and get mostly light, right? So again, you're trying to make this, you know, a good size, but you also want to have control over your brush. That, you know, when you want to have a little bit more of one or the other, then you can always come in and tip in just a little bit more dark. Okay, coming around your donut, you're going to pick a side. You can go all the way around clockwise if you want. And then you're going to come down, but a lot of times we don't put enough dark low enough. Right, so you got to make sure that you're going to go low enough with your dark so that when you come back and slightly overlap, you're not seeing the color of the paper. Right, got 100% coverage there, and then you have your tiny little donut. Okay, then if you want a little bit more freckling of white, then you can always add a little bit more freckle of bright white, just like a little C after. Right, just a little bit of a soft freckle that you can add. Okay, so just a simple little donut like that. Okay, so I'll just give you an example. And I can label this for you. Okay, so remember how to do that in there. And then again, you want to make these a little bit bigger, and we're going to do different colors. So we have some daisies in there that we played around with the yellow, and then I used the green in the actual poppies. Okay, so we'll get the green out, and you can pop that little donut in there in different colors. Okay, so basically the same little donut, just different colors. All right, so I'm going to leave this page here and not fill it in for you, because I want you guys to play and practice in this. So if you need to put this in the practice sheet, put some wax paper over it, practice your donut sizes in this now, and see how big you need to come. All right, so basically I'm going to draw with my pen for you, and you want to be able to put that donut basically in this shape. Okay, so a little exercise for you there. Let me just show you guys that scruffy again. You can add it to your sheets. Okay. Little donut. A little bit more on an angle. Okay, make sure you feel the dark in the middle. And then finish. And show you that again. Make sure you get the dark in there. Pull through. A little bit of freckles. Okay. So now we have our liners. Okay, so we want to have some stamens in there. So you just want to push down and then pull in. So it's almost like your butterfly antennas. Okay. And when you have that, if you're going straight, you don't get that same look. You can see that if I push and curl around, I almost get a better look than trying to pull them straight down. Okay, so you want to add a few in the back. Okay, so these guys are just going to wisp in and get lost into the background. Okay, and you can make them a little bit random. And then as you're coming down to the sides, you're just tucking them in. Then you can start going right up on top of your donut and adding your more stamens around it, on top of it, right? And you can curl in, some in different directions on your sides. And some smaller ones. Now you really want to make sure that they're dark enough that you can see them. Okay, so this is how we finish this little poppy here. Alrighty, so one of my favorite brushes sometimes to do daisies, I'm always pushing myself with the flat brush too, because I want to be able to do as many different things as I can with the flat brush. But I do like the round brush sometimes for doing daisy strokes. Some people think it's easier, but I do believe it gives you a little different shape to them, and gives you a little bit more of a different wider shape to them than you would with your flat brush. And so definitely with this style, I did use my round brush today. And to soften them a little bit, you know, you can use, again, your coffee latte with your white, or you can use a little bit of your medium grays. Okay, so it just depends on how warm or cool you want to make your design. Any of these medium tone colors would work. You don't want anything too dark. And with this kind of technique, definitely on the wood, you don't want to use too much water, right? You want to have a good paint. So sometimes I'll water my paint down with a little bit of water. Sometimes I'll water it down with a little bit of floating medium. Okay, so in this case, I definitely want to use a little bit of floating medium to water down my white layer a little bit. And it's picking up a little bit of the stain that I have underneath my plate here because it's not a multi-surface product. Right, that will pick up. That's why I told you guys to use your sealer. So I should have put that over here. And then clean out your brush, wipe it out if you want, and then pick up some more of that floating medium and make another little pile. Just bring over a little bit of it for now, just for some practice. And dilute just a little bit. So this is not inky, guys. This is not like your stain. This is just a little bit diluted and making it easier to work with to do your daisy strokes. Okay, so that you have that slip and then you can pop up on your chisel. Okay. So a lot of times I do just like just that little bit of dirtiness, just to say that I have a little bit of dark color or gray, whatever you choose, but a lot of white. And a lot of times what I'll do, because I want these daisies to look dominantly white, but I just want them to look a little softer white. Right? We're working on brown backgrounds, depends on your color of background. But with that tiny little bit of darker color, we'll do is add a little bit of streak to it. So with this type of daisy that I just did a really nice big strong punch down and then pull up to my chisel. Okay, so you can see the shadows that it brings from the coffee latte. So it's quite dominantly dark. Okay, so sometimes we have more than enough dark in our brush. I will just go ahead and keep picking up more white. Right? So you can do your random clock, pull those strokes in, and if I feel like it's getting too light, then definitely you can pull in a little bit more of your dark again. So depending on if you have it on an angle when you push down, you have half and half dark, you're going to have that dark show on one side and white on the other. If you should have your white pointing straight up, then it most likely will leave a lot of white dominantly in your petal. Okay, if you have your dark up when you're going to make your petal, you're definitely going to have a darker petal. Okay, so we definitely want to try and practice, all these different things, because then that way it really helps you with the look that you're going for. Okay, when you go straight down, you're giving yourself a really round daisy look. Okay. If you point yourself a little bit on an angle and slide down before you push, then that gives you a little bit more of a point. Okay. So these ones are just basically very fat and punch down right away and then pull. And you don't have to have a really neat center here, because you don't have to have a really neat point to finish, because you're going to be covering that with your center, right? So it's just basically your punch and then pull up so that you have some space in between and some narrowness, so then that way you can have all your different looks. Okay, so you want a little bit of a point to it, you know, then angle a little bit on your stroke. I'll show you that by itself. Okay, so then that way you have a little bit more of a point, softer point. Straight down, you're going to get more of a round shape. Okay, so I'm just flipping and flopping through my paint. Practice all the different directions, so then that way you can get a little bit more of a dance in your step, right? You're having a little bit more of a curl in your pedal when you're forcing yourself to do it upside down. Really practice those upside down. Okay, then you're pushing over. If you're right-handed, you're really over directing on an angle upside down, and then curl up towards your center. Okay, so always have your middle one grounded, do one on each side. Push again, pull. And you really want to have that whimsical daisy. You want to have that little curl. You want to have the odd one overlapping a little bit. You want to have the odd one having lots of space. And then we can flip another one into the side. And then again into the side. Okay, so that little bit of a dance, really forcing yourself. Don't be a photocopier and just keep pushing your strokes towards yourself. Because if you have to do it in the beginning, yes, I totally agree. In the beginning, you know, to get an idea of it. But hopefully you're at a level now that you've done, you know, your course number 4, and you've done lots of practicing in there, and you're feeling a little bit more confident to really bump up your step and give these flowers just that little bit more of a dance. Okay? And then when we go to do our center, again, it's the same idea. And you're popping it in there. But you see how much I've given myself, like these centers I gave in this look a little bit bigger center too, right? So you do want to have that little bit of open space showing when you're doing your center. All right, so we have 3 different kinds of leaves that we played around with in this design. And hopefully you guys are feeling comfortable with your strokes by now. You've jumped on the first 12 courses of my intro program and done lots of practicing here, and now you're ready to jump into a little different styles. And so I did play around with a couple different variations, and I didn't want it to look like a holly leaf. Okay, so it's just making it a little bit more jaggedy and random, and again, just playing around with your greens, adding a little bit more of your daffodil to warm things up a little bit, or a little bit of white to lighten things up a little bit, you know, trying to make them all look a little bit different. Okay, and then to make them stand out a little bit, I did choose to put the light on the outside. Okay, so depending on how long you want to make your leaf, sometimes I made them a little bit shorter, sometimes I made them a little bit longer. But basically, you know, 2 widths of your length of your brush. I've got the 16. And it's a good size. And you're going to come around and move up and then down. And then you can come down a little bit and then move up. And so you're doing that random movement and doing that a few times. And depending on how, you know, long you want your leaf to be, you could make this a little bit longer. And then you're going to push out to your point. Okay, so like I said, I tried to make them all a little bit different. And try not to make them look like a holly leaf. Okay, so again, to your point, dark to dark, pull in your vein to get the light to come through. And some of them I just did very, very loose and whimsical, guys. Right, so again, put your vein there if it helps. And like I said, I was trying not to make them look too much like a holly leaf, but jaggedy, kind of like, right? So I made this top part a little bit smaller. If you make the bottom part a little bit bigger, wider, and then especially when you're curling into the bottom, you want to make that leaf look like it's got a little bit more of a spin to it, right? Then definitely you're going to make the bottom side of your leaf a little bit bigger than the top part. Right, so then that way it makes it look a little bit more curly. And then again, when you're putting that vein in, you want to make sure you follow that little bit of a curl. Right, so depending on where you want to put them in your design, make them dance around your flowers. And like I said, some of them I did just really short. Oops. Random, we can do them all in one stroke. Finish that one up there. So yeah, but just trying to make them all look the same leaf 100 different ways of playing with it. And then we did another one there where it was a little bit more like similar to what we did in course number 4 with our daisy strokes. But these are just more like chisel strokes. So you're just gently pushing down enough to say that you're creating the smallest, skinniest little daisy stroke. And you're going to bring that in and start with your big one in the middle and then come in a little bit smaller on each side. Okay, working your way down a little bit. And then wherever there's a curl, it's a good place to put another little section. And adding some white in there, making it look a little bit different colors. Now you can just put 3 in spots if you want, or even 5 or 4. Right, so you're just kind of breaking this leaf up a little bit. Okay, so you don't have too big of a space. And you're going to brick layer them a little bit too. So some areas you might be a little tight, so you just want to put 3 in that corner. And go over your middle one again with a little lighter color. But now we're putting them on each side here. So we want one to come over here, and we want one to come a little bit lower, so they're a little more staggered. Tiny little chisel daisies. And so this is when we really want the flat brush to do our daisy stroke, because then we can get a really skinny little daisy stroke. Okay. And then you can fill them in a little bit more with just some random 3s. really, really small ones. So just try to make some a little bit smaller. Really, really skinny. Just a basic chisel. So again, chisel, chisel, chisel. A smaller, a smaller. Let me give you some examples there for you. And then the other little filler type flower I used with a number 6. I think this is a number 8, but yeah. So yeah, you go down to your size 6 when we do the project, but I'm going to show you with the 8, and you can practice with an 8 and then move down to your 6 if you feel that you want to make them a little bit smaller. Okay, so we're going to add some floating medium into our sap and make it a little bit more inky because we want these leaves to look a little more translucent. Okay, so we basically split it off into like 3 sections. So again, you can make your little branches. And then we're just barely pushing off to start off the first one. Then again, we're going to brick layer a little bit. Okay. And then try to leave room for your other stem work too, because we have more stems. Push this out a little bit more. Just one time only, right? So if you go over it again twice, you'll end up making them too dark. Okay. Fillers. It's okay, some may not have room for it, but we're going to try and keep room for, or you can just cross over. But normally we would add a little bit more lighter color. You can put some a little bit more on the main part of the stem. Little tiny little shadow leaf type flower, type leaves. Okay, and we can play around with different colors too. Like sometimes I will use burnt umber, or with the green, and make it a little bit more darker. Again, it depends on the project that you're doing. You can definitely make them a little bit more off color. So I'm just playing around with the colors that we have on our plate just to show you the strokes that we're going to be playing with. And then when we get to the wood, or if you choose to paint your wooden piece a total solid gray or green or teal or baby pink or whatever color you want, then those definitely will make different decisions for you when you go to make some of this filler flower. Okay, so I just wanted them to be dark and kind of blend in with the rest of them. All right, so we have our 3 leaves and then our 3 little flowers. So basically our other little flower is the orange and yellow little tiny guys with a number 6. So if you guys seen my tiny little course that I created to give you lots of practice on tiny strokes, Okay, I show you guys how I do a side to side blending. So I can blend both sides of my brush really good with these tiny little brushes. And we can lighten it up and still tip with a little bit of white if we need to. Okay. And then we wanted to make them look really tiny compared to the size of these big poppies, right? So they're basically our fancy teardrops, 5-petal flowers that we often do a little bigger. Okay, so these are just little tiny guys with your size 6. Okay, just to kind of brighten things up a little bit again. Here's just the end of my brush, just to add the smallest little dot. Okay, test your dots on your plate to make sure what size you want, but there's just a very, very little subtle, just a very little subtle dot in these little guys. Okay, we can definitely add a little bit more white in them too and make them look a little brighter. Alright, so that's basically all of the practice that you need to do for this project. And then if you're not ready to work on your wood pieces yet, you know, you want to practice some more, you want to send me your practice, guys, send it to me on my Facebook Messenger is the best place to go. And so take pictures of them, and hopefully I can help you with your what's going on. If it's your gradient, if you maybe don't have enough paint, you know, I can sometimes see by your practice. But don't worry too much about the practice on the paper, guys. Just get the hang of stroke work, and then when you go to move on to your other practice, then it should be a lot easier for you. But wood is a little bit more dry, so you may have to push it a little bit more. Keep adding more paint in there. Don't be afraid of your paint. And now that we have that sealer on the wood, it's definitely going to be easier for you guys to take a clean brush and erase off, or take a towel and just remove it completely if you weren't totally happy before it sets. Okay, so it's not a big deal. And yeah, so I think we're ready to move on to painting on our wood. All right, so now we're ready to paint on our design. And my favorite tool is just chalk usually, because it's very easy to erase if you don't like it. Okay, so we're going to map out our design, and we want our 2 poppies to be the main focus of the design. So we want one to kind of flip up, right? And then we want the other one to flip down. Okay, and we can make a little bit bigger. Okay, and this one's going to have a little bit more of a curl to this side, and this one's going to have the curl on the bottom side. Okay, and then we're going to put one daisy in the middle down here, and then we can put another one off to the side over up at the top, maybe half of one. Put another one over here. We don't have to do whole ones, right? Peek them around outside your poppies. I'll put some little filler leaves in there too, so we don't have to worry about putting them in there. It's just worrying about where our main flowers are going to be. And then we can put another daisy off to the side, over on the side. Okay, and then we're going to pull out more of our long chisel kind of leaves, right? So we can pull out a couple over to the side there. Then we can pull up one that comes up in that direction. So you're getting like almost like an S formation in your design. We can show more filler leaves, okay? And all our little leaves all the way around the outside to fill in. Okay, so those are the main 3 areas that I like to figure out is my big focal leaves, my big flowers, my secondary flowers, and then all my little flowers and all my filler leaves, they just kind of fill in the spaces after. So also to give it a little bit of variety too, sometimes you want to put the daisies behind the poppies, sometimes you want to lay them on top of the poppies, right? So for this design, actually, we're going to play around with setting in a couple poppies and then putting the other ones, we'll lay those ones a little bit more on top of the other ones. I kind of sketched out a design earlier to map out some ideas there that I wanted to do earlier, and so I definitely have a plan already in mind how I want this to look. Okay, for these daisies, we want them to, you know, be pretty same size that we were practicing with our size 8 round brush. Okay, and we want to make sure that we take out all of the excess if it's been sitting in our water buckets, so that we can get control over it again. We'll add some more fresh white to my plate, some clean floating medium, and dilute our white. Like we did earlier. Wipe all that out, add some more medium over here. So we don't need a lot of the darker color, just a little bit, and mostly white. Okay, really good. Fill up that brush 2/3 full, so that when you punch down, you're gonna have dominantly white. Okay, start up at the top and work our way in. Dance with your brush strokes a little bit. Really punch it in. Pick up just that little bit of brown to have some streaky marks and some depths in there. Okay. Just a little bit bigger. And I'm going to do my sides. Pull into the sides. And then we really only have to do half of this one. So I have a nice big glob happening over here, and I know that's exactly where I'm going to put my poppy. Okay, so you definitely want to take out those big globs, erase them out. And you have a little bit of white here, it's not a big deal. Actually, it'll just help with some coverage. Okay. But we definitely want to have a smoother look right here to layer our poppies on. Okay. And then we'll tuck this guy here behind them too. Okay, so I want that to spin out to the side a little bit. So I'm going to set, this is my top. Coming from different directions. Making it a little bit smaller on one side, a little bit bigger on the other side. It's really going to help the eye as well. Bring that all in. And then we'll set our centers in after. Okay, so I just wanted to pop those two in there, and then we'll pop the other one, and maybe we'll even add another little bud in there as well. Okay. And then we're going to get our 16 out again. Really dry that brush good, guys. Okay. So remember our direction. And the back petals can be a little bit bigger or like longer, right? You're going to pull them up a little bit higher. Get a little bit of that yellow in there without the green. That's what happens when you're using yellow for both sides, your leaves and your flowers. You get dirty sections sometimes. I'll just pull out that top layer so that I'm not hitting green. So we have our direction base set. We want our top of our petals to be there on the side, and then our side ones, and then our back one is going to flip right into the center. Okay. A bit more red. Half and half gradient. Go up with a couple of bumpies and down, like almost like a heart shape. And down. Okay, so sometimes you feel that you don't have good coverage. Definitely let it dry and go over it again. Okay, so I'll go ahead and set all of my petals the way I want, and then if I feel like I need to go over it again, by the time I get back to it, it's usually dry. Okay, add a little bit more yellow, bring it down, bring it back up into another petal. You're doing like double petals. Over to this side, bring it down, try to do a little bit of a smaller one and a bigger one. Make them random. Okay, but you want to try to come and have those spaces where you're having that little bit of a round, right? And if you're not seeing that, then you need to add just that little bit of yellow so that you can have a little bit of a wiggle. Right. So where you really want them joining is definitely at the bottom. Okay, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more yellow. Picking up lots of orange in my yellow. There we go, a little bit brighter. Okay, because especially as we're moving down, we want to connect these guys now with that yellow brim. I want to get that orange in there really good and have it tipped. So I'm really picking up all three colors. Now I want to also make sure that I'm covering a lot of my center area. So I'm going to move back and around, push up, flip, flip, around, and curl under. Okay. Where did you lose some of your yellow? You know, maybe it was on the second stroke here, so just go over that area. Oh, didn't need to go that whippy, flippy. Okay, just watch your area so you're not going too wide. Okay. Really see those curls. Feather it and really gentle so you don't see the connections. Right, and then often I'll just fill in this area. Okay, with all those globs that are in the middle. Come over to the other side. Now I want to create this upside down in a way where it's going to flip the other way. Okay, so if it's easier for you, definitely set your front top ones over here and your side ones over here. Okay, so you get a little bit of illusion here. So it's really looking like your side one is coming in. Okay. But we're still going to create it, setting this one in the back. Okay. Down, around. Really want the yellow. Come down, leave the space. And around. Come down where you left off, leave the space. And around. So you see how sometimes my last one is the biggest? Right, so you can make this one a little bit random. Make it a little bit more curly. If it's not covering too, you could add just that little bit of white. Right? I'm curling already. Oh well, we can curl those. Okay, coming down, and then your other hump. Okay, and then again, we're not coming out as wide. And let's do it this way. Sorry guys, I'm making you dizzy. Okay, so I'm going to come around, add that white on the edge to reinforce it, come out, bring that in, down, really close. And out and around. It's exaggerated backflips than we normally do. And then try to help that side pedal get a little brighter. Add a little bit of randomness in it if you want. A little bit more room. And fill that in. This should be pretty good. We can probably go right over it very quickly. Getting a really dirty yellow there. Yeah, really push that paint in there, correct the color. Now go over to pour some of that yellow. And then just try to be very careful and follow the original one. Yeah. Get really good coverage with these colors. You gotta go over things twice. Or take your blow dryer to it, dry it. It's not dry yet. Take your time. If you go over it, over your line, you can always erase as well. Lots of practice going over things twice, you know, as long as you're happy with your shape, then it's just adding a little bit more coverage. Adjusting your highlight if you need to. Okay. Flip it upside down to do the back. A little too yellow, you gotta kind of back up and add some more yellow too. And I've got these bright lights under me too, so sometimes it's shiny. Okay, down and up and then over. Follow that around. Sometimes I do have to stop even on my second coat. Pick up and adjust your colors. I'm gonna have to put some more yellow on my plate. And soften that in. Around. Much better. Actually, this one's not too bad over here. Did pretty good on that one. Because as you keep moving, using your brush too, if it was too watery in the beginning, you just took it out of your water, you know, by the time you use it a little bit and unload more paint, you know, usually it does get a little bit better after working it. Okay, so you get a little bit better coverage. Like I said, I've hardly been picking up any medium at all. Just trying to really fight with that paint. Or not fight with it, but just, you know, keep adding more paint. Don't be afraid to keep adding more paint. Okay, so now we're going to come over into our ground brush again, and we're going to continue on with finishing our daisy strokes. I want to layer one that's going to almost touch each poppy. Okay, come over, hopefully our piles are still good for us over here. And we're going to put one right in the middle here. Okay, so I want to set my top in there, and then bring in my petals from that side. So I'm gonna not be afraid of touching my poppies. Okay, you want to touch them and overlap them a little bit. Okay. And bring in your sides in. Try not to be too globby. And that's why I like to do side to side, working my way in. And then add a nice big one for the center to finish. Okay, and then we're going to put another one to layer over here on the top. And pick up just a little bit of brown. To the center. And center. And to the center. And yeah, I think we should make a little bit of a bud over on the side here. Okay, so we're going to tuck this guy in underneath our leaves. And so I'm going to put one in the middle. Not putting as much pressure on the little bud guy. Okay, then I'm going to bring one on each side of it, and I'm going to curl them around the little guy. I'm going to just come a little bit lower and pull in another one on each side. Then you can pull in another daisy stroke from the outside. And another one from the outside. That makes a nice, interesting kind of half flower. Alright, trying to make sure that you have some definition. That's why I went over and grabbed that little bit more brown so I can have some definition to the back petal. A soft white daisy there. And if you weren't happy with it, like I said, it's very easy to come in and pick up your brush. If you want to narrow that stroke down a little bit, you can always cheat a little bit and knock some off. Right? Got that sealer there. It's going to help protect our background. Is it only because we're using such a water-based regular paint that's very watered down? If you were doing it with a multi-surface, like a full coverage, then that would be in there with your paint already, your sealers are already there. Okay, so now we're going to go and pick up our 16 again. If you were using a 12, you'd just have a slightly smaller design. So again, it just depends on your design. I don't have an inch ruler here with me, but this one here is 14 centimeters by about 35, I don't know, probably 40 wide. I just picked this up at, like I said, Hobby Lobby or Dollar Tree or something like that. Or already have them already made with the rope already there for you. Okay, so we're gonna go into our leaves now. Chisel style. We need some floating medium in there a little bit. Wake up that pile. Add a little bit of yellow or a little bit of white to change them up a little bit. We'll go with a little bit of white. And add a little more yellow to the other style of leaf. Okay, so we're still using citrus as our base, but we can change it up a little bit. Okay, so to set our main branches where you want them to be, okay, so we're going to just put our little tiny chisel in there just to guide us. And then we can pull out another one and curl that right around a little half flower there. So we're going to do a little bit of layering. And you can start with the bottom one, if you, whatever one you think is going to be under. Okay, so we're going to start doing our little pressures. Often, like, I'm trying to stay out of the wet paint here too, so I find a spot that I can lean on, that I can put my little baby finger on and rest it so that I can get the accuracy. Alright, so if you're floating up in the air, trying to stay out of your wet paint, you know, you might not get that same kind of look and pressure. So you got to ground yourself somewhere, or let things dry, and that way you won't touch them. Okay, so like I said, this is a little bit smaller than our practice set we were doing, but again, depends on where you're putting them, right? So I want to layer a little bit more focus of this bigger one on top. Right, so I'm just going to start this one and then work on the one that's going to be on top. Sometimes we can get 2 strokes out of our little tiny daisy ones because we're not pushing very hard, right? Pick up white every once in a while. And then when you want to layer, you definitely need to make sure that you have that white in there, so then it stands out on top of the other one. Okay. And we can layer a little bit on our flower and over onto the other stem of it. Work our way down. Put a couple just to fill it in. Okay, and then sometimes I'll just dab a little bit of the dark there just to give it a bit of a base. Add another little one there. Again, I was trying to be little, but I overstepped myself. So again, just grab another brush, erase what you don't like. Not a big deal. Okay, so then you can decide if you want to add any areas that have big spaces. Put a little different curl into a few of them, right? Then we're going to curl this one from the bottom under. And white. alternate. Should have done this one first for you guys. It was easier, right? Than the overlap one. Try to make them a little bit tiny bit bigger too as you get closer to the base. Overlap just to finish. And you can always layer a few on top of each other too if you want a little bit more of a 3D look. Right, so you're just going to touch just a couple smaller ones in front. Okay, and definitely you want to punch them up a little bit more with some white. And cross over them so that you can really see the direction change. There's that one that's got a spill over there. Curl it, really curl it over. Okay, but try to leave some space in between too, so they look like all little separate leaves. Got a little bit of paint on here. Just using my buffer. Alright, my fingers probably. And here it's gone. Okay, so that's our bigger leaves. And then now we can add a little bit more yellow. We need some fresh yellow. Brighten this green back up again. And then we can put in a little bit of a stem on this guy here. Okay, so we gotta try and get in there. So we can just do more of those little daisy punches. We'll do it with the dark on the top. Okay. Just to give it a little bit of a stem. And then grab a clean brush and erase it off of your poppy so that it looks like it's behind it again. Okay, so now we want to put in a few of those other leaves. Again, some of them can be a little bit more yellow than others. Spread in one that maybe comes in like this. You can do just a little tiny guy. Overlap a little bit if you want. A little bit too gloopy, so if you are too much paint, like I said, the sealer really makes it slipperier and so much easier to paint on the paper. We'll pop in our stem. And I want to put another little tiny one over here. So again, we're just trying to make the small ones. More peak. Curl it in there. Put another one over here. If they're small, you can sometimes do them all in one stroke, all the way around, and yeah. And I'm gonna put another one over here. Your design, depending on how big you make yours. I'm just going to try and fill it in. Okay, and then you're going to try and visualize your triangle formation for all your designs, right? So I've got one here, one up here, right? So I've got triangle over here. And usually there's odd numbers, but you know, you can definitely when you have this busy of a design, they're not really counting anymore, right? But you do try to keep them spread out so that you can see almost your triangles. And then I'm trying to decide with one more for space too, right? Put some more of those filler leaves in there. Put another one will overlap these two. Okay. So you guys are getting me deciding on the fly here too. I said sometimes I just do a rough idea in my head on what I want to do, and then I do the class with, then I do the design, show you guys, and then I end up doing 2 of everything. So when I do this kind of class, hopefully you guys are liking that I'm designing. This is kind of how the process goes when I'm trying to come up with new stuff for you. It isn't that's original. Okay, so there we've got our 5. One's kind of layering over another one, makes it look a little bit more interesting too. Okay, so let's go and get our size 8, or if you want to make them even smaller, you can make them all with your size 6. And again, if you're not sure, you can always add more chalk lines and, you know, to remind yourself where you want to put all these little extra. But you're trying to encourage the design to still go in that like S formation too, right? So we want to have one that's going to curl around and add to the back here. Okay, so we're just going to pull a stem coming up. Okay, work on one stem at a time if you want. Pull. All on one one side if you want. Can't see it, then maybe you need to come a little bit heavier. Again, if you're not happy with something, it's because it's a lot of medium in there, so sometimes we squish out differently or we don't like it. I'm going to erase it. What are we going to do? Make sure that they were perfect. Alternate. Now you'll know that you have, maybe a little bit of room if you wanted to pull another stem and just do a couple over in here. And we want to pull another one coming down and under. Pull. Up to your point. Push. And also put in like a little bit of a smaller one here. Peeking in. Here. Just a couple fillers now, just in small spaces. And then we're going to add those other little flowers too. So you can layer those in a few spots. Put some more there. Okay, so we have our main focus here, a couple fillers there. And then if we feel like we still want to add, a couple more fillers, you can always add more of those later. Make sure, it's not going to be too busy with all your other little flowers here. And make sure that these are dry where you want to add your little flowers. Yep, that direction that I have, okay. Right there, wake up our little side to side pile. Add a little bit of white to it. Put a couple little flowers over here. Can add some little tiny half flowers. Layer them. Remember, sometimes these colors you have to go over twice. So try not to make them too thick. And just expect to go over them twice. Okay. And layer. here. Out of there. A lot of times, like I said, I know I'm going to have to do a base coat on here. I add some white in there, fill it in, get that coverage started, and let it dry. And then come back. There, another little one over here. You can always just do like little half flowers in places too, right? Just peeking out. All one there. Try not to pick up green in my plate now. We don't need too many of these little guys, you know, just a few here and there. Put another little half one up here. So I'm gonna put some fresh white on my plate there. I'm gonna go and do the second coat. And get some better white in there. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry. And then we're gonna do some scruffy work. Okay, so we're gonna dry out our scruffy really good. If you have another one somewhere, wonderful. Then that way you can play around with your green and your yellows with different scruffies. Otherwise, you gotta clean it really good, changing colors. So it's usually easier to go from light to dark. So if we want to do all of the light ones first, we can play around with our yellow and orange ones first. Or not yellow and orange. The Pablo and yellow. Just a little bit of white. Not much, because you still want a freckle, right? So you want to have that little bit of darkness so that you can add that little extra dimension. Okay, so again, depending on which way you want to flip things, right? We definitely want this top guy to look like he's coming up to the left a little bit. Right, so we can start our whole base in that direction. Add a little bit more down so that when you're starting to come around in your little freckle, you have some dark in there. little hole. Just lightly. Sometimes you can do all the freckling last too, right? So if you want to go ahead and find all of your centers. And again, I'm trying to do this one really small because I want this one to look like it's a little bit more on an angle. And I might have to do some erasing. Play with your colors. Tap a little bit more of a hole in there if you have to. We definitely want to have that Pablo in there to look like it's underneath. Right, this guy has to be behind. And you can always go in and add little shadows or when things are dry. Maybe this one can look a little bit darker. And then this guy here is peeking out too. Okay, so you only see half of the little donut. And then this guy does look like he's facing this way too. But sometimes you have no choice but to follow how you feel with the flower, right? So definitely gonna have to stick this way. You see how it just falls right into the little hole there. So now we gotta clean our scruffy really good if you only have one. And pick up your sap and citrus. Okay, more citrus than sap. You only want just that small shadow. And if you want to add a little bit of warmth, or you can, just a little tiny bit. Okay. And then we're going to put in our centers. We want to make sure that these guys are bigger than the other ones. And then this one I want to put my centers in upside down. So the bottom of the center is just going to be covering just where the bottom of the little ribbons are. Okay. It helps to put it in the same direction. Start at the top. More on an oval. Not so much like a circle. These ones are like a really donut, like a real circle. These ones you want to try and be a little bit more on an oval. Okay. Put in that little donut. Add a little bit of freckles of white. Okay. Then we're going to pick up our liner brush and we're going to add some stamens into our poppies. We want to water down, especially if your paint has been out like the whole time. Mine has through the recording. It's gotten probably a little bit thicker. So again, sometimes I like to use water to make like curlicues or little tiny details, and when I want really small lines. Okay, so I'll take off the excess, and then you're only picking up a little bit of the paint. Don't make it too watery, because you want to have control. All right, test it. Test it on a little bit of paper. Okay, so you're just pushing and pulling. And so again, we're just putting some really small ones in the background. And a little bit of red. You can make some a little longer, some a little bit wider. Okay, so now I'm coming around a little bit more on my side. Now I want to put in a couple of the middle ones. Maybe one short, maybe one long. And make it a little shorter. Okay, so basically only 3 in there. And again, I'm curling some underneath. And make your little bowl. If you want to add some citrus or more highlights to them, you can too. You can multi-load your brush, especially when you're layering some on top of each other. You want it to stand out a little bit more. Definitely add little highlights on your stamens. Add like little yellow dots on them. There's a couple different variations. But like I said, I'm trying to bump you up, but I am trying to stay a little bit simple for you guys too. See, some of my lines were getting a little bit thick. You definitely need to play with your consistency of your paint. But keep adding water to it and keep an eye on how you're doing. Okay. And try to make sure that they're nice and thin. You can even put a little bit of black in here if you really wanted to have them stand out a little bit more, or darker or lighter. Depends on where you like. Okay, so very, very front. Maybe even tip in a little bit more white. Not too much white. Always make sure your little donuts are dry before you're doing anything. If you feel like you're not sure, improvise a little there. And it's going to float right in there. Some people like to put like dots, or, you know, I'm just trying to make them look a little bit different. Okay, really curly. So you can always add more shading to things, guys. If you want to add a little bit of berry wine, definitely you can always pop in just that smallest amount of berry wine and add a little bit more shading underneath. Always helps to soften. Adding that little extra shading. And sometimes, you know, you can float around a little bit more burnt umber, or if you want to use the your stain, whatever stain color you used. Hardly got any burnt umber left there in that one. And then you're gonna just float in. You take a little bigger brush. You can use your 8 or your 10, whatever you feel comfortable with. When everything's all nice and dry, you're just gonna erase all the chalk so you can see what you got left out of your design. Right, and then you can start making decisions on if you want to pop in a couple more shadow leaves, or, you know, it just depends on what you want to do. Okay, but sometimes you can float some floating medium and some burnt umber, just a very small amount of it, very watered down. And if you feel like you want to intensify anything after, you could always go in and add a little bit more burnt umber around underneath your flowers or underneath your leaves. Right. Always add a little bit more, just in spots. Right? You don't want it to just look dark, because then you could have just done the whole thing dark. But definitely you can intensify some areas. It just helps to add a little bit more filler in spaces if you have a big void or something. I'm going to find the odd petal. Okay, so you're leaving those light marks in there too. Mostly the shadows are always at the bottom of things. So you can just be selective on where you want to add just a little tiny bit if you want, if you have room for it. Add more depth around your corners still if you want. You know, you can always play around with that as well. If you really want to add a few curly cues, you could. You can always add curly cues. And test your colors, see if you like them. Right, especially off on our ends, we have a bit more room. You know, you can always pop in a couple of light ones. Okay. And then of course, you gotta put your little signature. Okay, just put a small there, and then if you want, I'll put the full official signing and date on the back. Oh, and we do have to finish our little flowers here. Get our 6-pack out again. And we'll go over these flowers one more time. Got a new pile here so we don't get into our brown. Add a little bit more white into it, brighten up that yellow. Okay, so you'll see that you get much better coverage second time. Flip flop and tip. Okay. And tip. We depend on tipping a lot more with smaller brushes, that's for sure. We want to see all 3 colors. We want to see the yellow, the orange, and the white. I see in that one. So nice fall colors, even though we're in remembrance design. Still can do some nice warm colors. And one back here. Can't see too much yellow on that one. It's mostly orange and white. We're right on a white flower too, so you don't need as much white, but over here where you have the green, you can definitely tip a little bit more white. Half flower there, peeking over. There. That looks way better now. white a little bit more. Okay, and then we're gonna do some dots if we have some dark left there. You can always do like a couple dots, you know, random little dots, or just depends however you want it to look. Couple little taps. Even tap a little white. Oops, too big. Knew I was going to get excited. Okay, not a big deal. Just pull it out of there. Even your green, if you wait till your flowers are completely dry, you can always erase them. There. There we go. Alright, so I hope you like this little fun, quick sign. Hope you learned lots, and share your finished designs on the group, guys. I'd love to see them. And don't hesitate to reach out to me if you need any help in any way. You keep all your brushes not drowning in your water until you have time to go and clean them properly. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you again soon.